All right. Well, hello everyone and welcome. And thanks for joining today's live webinar. Goodbye, AGPM, Modernizing Group Policy Management. So with today's Microsoft Advanced Group Policy Management reaching the end of life, there's a lot of organizations and practitioners that are understandably wondering about the future and the best steps to take moving forward. So today, we're going to unpack what AGPM really provided, what risks emerge now that it's retired, and what to look for in a modern approach to group policy government, especially around delegated administration, continuous visibility, and fast rollback and recovery from accidental or malicious GPO changes. I'm very excited to be joined by two experts. Carig Birch, he's our principal security engineer at Cayosoft. Craig has more than 24 years of hands-on experience in Active Directory, architecture, and security. And we also have Brian Desmond. Brian is a principal at Ravenswood Technology Group. He's a Microsoft MVP, an author, and a longtime identity and security practitioner. So we're all very, happy to have both of these guys on here. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items that I want to go over. First, yes, the session is being recorded. We'll be making this available to everybody by the end of the week. So just be on the lookout in the email that you registered for the webinar for. We'll be sending out the recording to that. And then second, we do have a live Q&A that's being monitored. And so please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop those into the Q&A section here. I'm going to be keeping an eye on it. If the questions are relevant to the conversation in real time, we're going to do our best to bring those up, but we absolutely are dedicating a few minutes towards the end of the session just to make sure that we're addressing all of the questions that are being asked. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Craig so we can get started.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Drew. First of all, thanks everyone for joining. Today we are going to talk about AGPM. It is end of life, right? So, and why that matters beyond just losing your tool. So, but I want to lay some ground rules. So, first of all, the session is not about a one-to-one AGPM replacement, and I'll explain why that's the case. So, if we think about group policy management governance, I want you to start thinking about it in the context of modern endpoint and identity management. And really key in on that word identity management as part of this modern governance. So before we get started, I want to start out by saying, ask yourself a couple of questions. The first question you should ask yourself is, how are you managing group policy today? So start with that question. The second question I want you to ask is, are you only managing group policy through on-prem Active Directory? Or have you started your journey to migrate to Microsoft Intune? And then the next question I want you to ask yourself is, who can make changes in your environment to both group policy and Microsoft Intune? So the next question I want you to focus on is, if someone made a change in your environment, how are you getting visibility in? And then lastly, probably the most important one is, if someone made a change in your environment, could you easily roll that setting back, whether it be somebody internal or a malicious actor making that change in your environment? So to ground this conversation, you may not be familiar with what AGPM stands for, so Advanced Group Policy Management inside of Microsoft. So I'm going to ask Brian to give some background around what AGPM is and what it really was doing for organizations. Brian, could you give some context?
Yeah, so AGPM was part of an acquisition Microsoft made like 20 years ago from a company called Desktop Standard, and it plugs into the Group Policy Management Console, GPMC, that everyone knows and perhaps loves. And it's really there to put governance around group policy, which is super important because of how much risk group policy can introduce. In an organization where you have policies that are applying to all your servers or all your end user devices, a mistake there or a malicious actor can impact every single device that's impacted by that policy with a click of a button. So AGPM brings things like change control and approval workflows and the ability to do versioning and rollbacks that you can see what changed or go back if a change didn't work out.
Okay. So you're saying basically AGPM was primarily acting as also governance, but also doing more of like a repository for group policy as well, with some delegation.
Those were the use cases that we typically saw, yeah.
Okay. So with AGPM now end of life and a lot of organizations using AGPM today, would it be smart for them to continue to use AGPM because it's not supported? It's no longer going to be patched. What are some of the concerns that you see? Those are the ones that come top of mind for me.
Yeah, I think anyone that's using the capabilities today is going to need to find an alternative. The tool is, like you said, it's end of life. It's not being updated. It hasn't really been updated in a long time, so there's not really innovation that's happening there or keeping up with the requirements of today's organization. And the other thing is just thinking about as you mentioned, as people are evolving to Intune and modern endpoint management, having that governance transcend both on premises and cloud native, as opposed to something like AGPM that's 100% on premises.
Is it fair to say using AGPM was mostly done through the GPMC console? Someone's going in and manually editing group policy, doing that check-in, check-out feature, getting approval, have that version control, and then someone deploying it to production? Is
Yeah, I mean that's the typical workflow.
okay. With today, you mentioned Intune and really just modern endpoint management as a whole. Are we seeing changes where we're no longer just using GPMC to make those changes? Is it possible that we're making these changes through PowerShell coding, scripting in organizations, or are they still just relying on manual edits using GPMC?
And the majority of what we see is manual edits, and obviously
Okay.
the human factor that's involved there can translate to mistakes, and mistakes can translate to downtime and issues and so forth. There are PowerShell opportunities to automate changes to group policies. Certainly when our team builds AD environments, we have a lot of automation that we've built around that. But I think for most day-to-day where we see, hey, we're going to change this setting or link a new policy for a new requirement, that's still done very manually.
So you mentioned for mass changes, though, maybe building out a new environment, it can be scripted using PowerShell. So if we look at it from that aspect, right? So I want to kind of set the framing here is not from an insider. So maybe we are still doing the manual edits using GPMC and the tooling that was provided by Microsoft. But if we look at from the outside world, PowerShell is very capable solution. So an attacker could use PowerShell or some other scripting language to modify group policy settings today that could bypass AGPM altogether. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, it's 100% dependent on making sure that only the right permissions are delegated. So if a service account or an administrator has permissions to make changes, or they're a domain admin tier 0 actor, AGPM isn't going to necessarily help you there.
Okay. And so the other thing is around AGPM and from a context perspective, that delegation that is done within AGPM, is that always so? If it's not just in time, right? So it's always on privileges that we've granted within the product. So if someone was able to get access to one of those groups or users' accounts, they could perform those activities. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean the compensating control is approval workflows, so
Okay.
that ideally will help, but it's certainly not modernized with just-in-time access like we would do when building a PAM or PAM system in today's day.
Yes. So if I kind of look back and kind of going back to when I was an AD admin way back in the day, 20 plus years ago, right? Um, we made group policy changes, in our environments. And one of the biggest, I'll say, factors of using something like AGPM was that governance, right? So the ability to really have a second set of eyes in the approval chain around, okay, I made this change, I reviewed the change, and now I put the change in place, as well as you mentioned, having some version control as well. But when I look at it from today's modern aspect, right? So we're not just dealing usually with group policy management. Now we might have to also deal with Microsoft Intune policies coming into play. But really, when we're looking at it from just those aspects, but then if we add in the identity layer and having always on access, we want to move to more just-in-time access. I feel like some of those things were really good 20 years ago, or even 5, 10 years ago in regards to that governance model on AGPM. So I'm not trying to downplay that, but I do think that it wasn't designed for today's modern attack surface or being able to really address managing group policy either through PowerShell or even group policy as code. So those are some of the things I want the folks on the phone to think about in that context. So I really believe the operational model that AGPM was designed for, I don't want to say it no longer exists, but I'm going to say it's probably not exactly the same as it was before. Because from you mentioning how you guys are building stuff today, you may do scripted, automated changes via group policy management or through PowerShell. So multiple tools outside of AGPM can be used to manage both group policy, but also Intune. And then if we look at it, hybrid identity and cloud services, right? They've increased both really the speed at which these changes can be made from an attacker's perspective, as well as the blast radius. And we've seen this with Microsoft Intune. It can also apply to group policy. So don't get me wrong, right? Group policy still plays a critical role in the environment, but I believe, right, how we operate it is fundamentally changing because of what I mentioned earlier. The attackers are no longer, they're not worried about your governance as far as check in, check out. They are able to go in and manipulate once they get in your environment, group policy in different ways using different tooling, etc. So that's what I want to kind of talk about today is what that looks like in a modern world. So again, if we are looking at it from looking at tooling alone, I think that that's not the full picture. We really need to look at what are the capabilities that we need to manage, group policy, but as well as Intune. So as I keep talking about Intune, so I want Brian, if you could give some background on what that looks like when it comes to Microsoft Intune, and then I'll come back to what are some of the controls that need to be in place for both environments.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a large chunk of our customers are shifting from a traditional domain join or hybrid enter join to devices that are solely enter joined from an identity perspective, and then are being managed with Intune in lieu of group policy. And that model is, for anyone that is used to the group policy model, is much different in many ways, but also similar in others. The number one thing is that you no longer need a line of sight to the network, to a domain controller. You don't need to be on VPN or connected to a network in the office to receive settings and to get those refreshed and so forth. But with that shift to Intune, obviously the same things group policy can do, pushing registry settings and other Windows tweaks are there. Sometimes the model is a little bit different, but the fundamental capability is the same. But then there's a whole lot more, from application distribution to security settings with Defender to patching. All the monitoring and telemetry that the device reports back to Intune is it's a much better management experience than what group policy can do. You look at group policy itself; it really hasn't evolved hardly at all since it came with Windows 2000. 27 plus years ago. Whereas Intune, we're seeing updates to it, on a weekly or monthly basis.
Perfect. So in your day-to-day experience, because you're obviously working with clients, customers, are you seeing more of a hybrid environment where it's both group policy and Intune? And if that's the case, what does that percentage look like?
For the most part, when we see our customers moving to Intune, they're no longer using group policy to manage those end user devices. Things like servers and other domain joined assets still stay with group policy. Customers we have that have OT or operational technology environments, so manufacturing, process control, those sorts of things. In many cases, those devices still stay domain joined and are managed with group policy in lieu of Intune. But for traditional end user devices, we see that as an opportunity to cut the cord, if you will. And also, a lot of times it's also an opportunity to revisit decades of technical debt that has accrued. We go through these exercises where people look at GPOs and what's in them as they're moving to Intune and ask the question of why are even any of these settings there? And a lot of the times the answer is, they haven't been needed in a really long time. So it's a good opportunity to start clean.
I remember going back in my day, again, being in different customer environments. So we're migrating over to more modern settings, but we still see like IE7 browser settings in group policy in organizations. So, I mean, obviously you mentioned legacy, and you mentioned a really good point as well. So you mentioned that organizations are moving more towards modern day endpoint management for the end user, right? So because we're not connected to the network on a regular basis, we need to be able to get policy down to the desktop. But you also brought up an interesting point. That's not the case for our servers, right? So what I heard is group policy is still being used to manage your servers that are within your Active Directory environment today and at your customer locations or your clients' locations. Did I understand that correct?
Yeah, that's typically what we're seeing. Certainly there's exceptions to that with modern approaches, things like containers and so forth. But for the traditional Windows server that's running applications, that's domain joined, group policy is, for most of our customers, is still a huge part of the configuration management story.
Okay. So if we look at that just from that aspect, right? So what I'm hearing kind of behind the scenes is group policy is not going to go away completely for a lot of organizations for a very long time. So we need to have something to help supplement us because AGPM is no longer a viable solution because it's not supported. It is end of life. So if we look at some key characteristics, and I want you to kind of chime in here as well, Brian, is one of the things you mentioned is being able to delegate access, governance in an organization. So if we look at it from an identity management perspective, or I'll even go further, a Microsoft identity management perspective, shouldn't we be applying the same principles that we do for Entra ID access? Think about just-in-time access, just enough privileges to perform the work that needs to be done at the time that the work needs to be done, and then remove that access afterwards from a group policy or Intune perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Intune is a little bit easier because that's covered by PIM, privileged identity management in Entra. So there's a native solution available there. From a traditional on-premises perspective, that whole concept of just-in-time access to AD is a little more complicated. Certainly, there's lots of PAM products on the market that do that, and then there is actually a native capability that's baked into Windows that can do that when we build administrative forests, or some people call them red forests. We use that so that you can elevate either a full domain admin or just to a lower tier 1 or tier 2 administrative role for just a short period of time, and AD will honor that period of time and issue curb tickets and so forth that are time bound as well.
Perfect. So governance is still required. We're saying we want just-in-time access. So these are some controls that still need to be in place from modern day management. So the next one I want to talk about is also visibility into those changes, because AGPM, because of the check-in, check-out, the version control, it gave organizations some visibility into what's going into that group policy, right? There was different reporting mechanisms, et cetera, you could run. So do you think that's still critical when you're looking at a replacement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are, regardless of how you do it, that change tracking, change auditing, whether it's via SIM or another tool, third-party tool, being aware of what's going on, both from a security monitoring perspective and also just checks and balances as humans are making plan changes and so forth is important for troubleshooting too.
And then one of the other key functionality that I heard was being able to roll back those changes if something changed from a group policy perspective. So AGPM, you could roll back to a previous version, I believe, through the check-in, check-out approval process. So, I mean, that's still something I would think organizations would want to have within a solution as well. Is that a fair assessment there?
Yeah, I think it's a solid, nice to have. Is it absolutely critical? Not necessarily, but from a risk management and recovery perspective, it adds a lot of value.
So if I go back to those 4 or 5 questions that I asked earlier to the audience, right? So the first thing I said is I want you to think about how you're managing group policy today. And then the next question was, are you just managing group policy or are you also on your journey to Microsoft Intune? And then how are you getting visibility into changes, whether it be on the inside or from the outside? And then also, if a change was made in your environment, whether it be Craig made the change as an admin or the bad actor was in my environment, could you easily roll those changes back? So we talked about some core features that I'm going to talk about a little bit more and why that's important. And also, if we tie that back into the way that Microsoft PIM works and with modern day management within Intune, these concepts are not new. So that's one of the things I want to talk about as well. I think there was a question that came in. Brian, I don't know if you want to fill that one, or Drew, did you see it?
We got 2 questions that actually came in. One was David asked, how can Intune manage server GPOs? You want to take that one on first?
Yeah, the short answer is it can't.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Brian. The other one, Francisco just asked, when moving to Intune, would you recommend configuring it to enforce CSPs over GPOs?
Yeah, ultimately you want one or the other to win. For clarity, CSPs are the configuration providers. It's the APIs that Windows services that Intune and other MDM products use to push settings into Windows. So ultimately, as you're doing that migration, what you don't want is 2 votes. So as you've moved to Intune, by enforcing those CSP settings, it means that Intune wins if there's a conflict with group policy.
Great. Thanks,
Is that
Brian.
it? Are there any more questions before we jump on?
Nope, those were the only
Okay.
2. So hopefully that addressed it. And Francisco or David, if you have any other questions or you want to dive deeper into that, we can chat through it later. Oh,
I think
David
there's
asked,
yeah.
will you be speaking to STIGs on Windows Server?
I don't think we have anything
Go ahead.
specific. STIGs, for those who don't know, are a set of recommended security baselines for Windows and lots of other things, and they're available as group policies. And then Intune has what are called security baselines, which are a similar sort of model that Microsoft distributes. And then there's options to bring third-party ones like from CIS in as traditional configurations profiles.
I mean, those are usually, like, as Brian mentioned, they're more hardened baselines to improve your overall security posture. We weren't planning to go into a deep dive on those policies, more around what it looks like to basically manage Microsoft endpoints using group policy and Microsoft Intune. So when we kind of go back to that topic, right? So we were talking about PIM, being a native capability within Entra ID for being able to manage Intune policy and configuration, your conditional access policies, etc., inside of Microsoft Entra ID. But there's not really an easy way to really do that same capability within native Active Directory, right? So there are some concepts of maybe just-in-time or temporal access. I think you mentioned, Brian, as well, in later versions of Active Directory, if you apply that schema setting in your environment. But outside of that, there's not a hard, easy native way to do that. Do you agree with that, Brian?
Yeah, all the plumbing is there, but there's no GUI, if you will, to take advantage of it. So, at least for us, when we do this with customers, we've built a PowerShell-based wrapper so that admins can elevate and see their roles and so forth. But it's not like a point and click type experience that you can get with an out-of-the-box PAM tool.
Okay. So with that being stated, right? So what is, again, we talked about some key capabilities that you need, right? We need to be able to have some kind of delegation, just-in-time access. We need visibility into those changes. We want to be able to roll back changes in both group policy and Microsoft Intune policy as well, from an organization, whether that becomes from the inside where an admin makes a mistake, or something more malicious inside of our organization. So based on those things that I talked about, right? So I want to show you how Cayosoft is going to address a couple of those areas. And it's not, again, a direct replacement for AGPM, but really a mind shift on what are the core functionality that's required to really address today's modern endpoint management. And then we'll come back to Brian and us for closing, but I want to kind of jump in and show you a couple areas here in a second. So I'm going to share out my screen. And the first thing I want to talk about is basically being able to manage group policy through GPMC, because that's, as Brian, you mentioned, a lot of organizations are still using GPMC for that group policy management. So I have a product called Cayosoft Guardian in place, and what it's doing is monitoring all changes inside of Active Directory, right? Group management, so additions to groups, also group policy changes, being able to see what changed, who'd made the change. But then if we add in another layer called Cayosoft Administrator, and I'll go through that in a minute, we can also do just-in-time access, or what we call restricted group access. So I do not have permissions on a regular basis to make changes inside of Active Directory for group policy. So to kind of demonstrate this, I'm going to launch Group Policy Management Console as this guy here. So I'm going to run as a different user. I'm just going to kind of show you this. I'm going to log in with this account. And what I want you to see, I have no ability to make any modification to the group policy in this scenario, right? So, and that's because I've applied just-in-time principles to GPMC through native delegation through Active Directory. And we have steps on how to set this up using Cayosoft Guardian. The other thing I want to say is, right, so Guardian also acts as a control. It has the ability to roll back changes automatically if someone was to go in and make changes to the environment. So to kind of demonstrate that up front is, you can see right now, Carig Birch has no access. My tier 0 account has no access to group policy management. So the next thing I want to show you is I'm going to go in and make another change inside of the environment. And I want to show you a Cayosoft Guardian with its auto rollback functionality in play for this group management. And then I'll show you how administrator can actually do the just-in-time access. So I'm going to run as a different user again. I'm going to log in as this guy. So inside of my Active Directory, I have a couple groups, and this group here is a member, right? So we can see this group here is as T0 GPO admins, there's no members. I'm going to manipulate this and try to add someone to the group. So I'm going to add the bad guy, just for demonstration purposes. So what I want you to see is, here in a minute, we see inside of Cayosoft Guardian that this user, the bad guy, was added to tier 0 groups. So through native capabilities, this Carig Birch guy tried to add the bad guy to this tier 0 GPO admins, which is used to restrict who can make modifications to my tier 0 group policies in my organization. So I can see again who initiated that change and what that change was done, and it was an AD group type. Well, what I want you to understand is the very next thing is you're going to see that change was automatically controlled by Cayosoft Guardian. So Cayosoft Guardian went in and said, that's not an allowed change. Carig Birch is not allowed to make changes to this group within inside of my Active Directory. We determined that account is not allowed to make that change. And the way we're doing that through is, to give you some background, we have a custom change role that's actually monitoring these GPO admin groups 24/7, 365. So if someone tries to manage that group outside of the next thing I'm going to talk about is Cayosoft Administrator, then that change will be rolled back. Now, I can also add additional accounts in there that says, hey, from a break glass perspective, maybe the built-in administrator account should be able to make that change. And certainly I have done that just in case for some reason Cayosoft Administrator was not available in a scenario. But what I want to show you next is just-in-time access inside Cayosoft Administrator and that approval process. So let me jump to the administrator product here and kind of show that next. So what I want to start out with is I'm going to log in with a user account. Give me a minute. There we go. I'm going to log in with this account here, this tier 0 Carig Birch account. And hopefully I typed the password correct. So now you can see, first of all, Cayosoft Administrator has very granular delegation. So I was able to restrict what this account can actually see. But for demonstration purposes, I really want to focus on the restricted group management piece with the approval piece as part of this access. Because remember, Carig Birch, or that tier 0 Carig Birch, couldn't make changes to group policy. So now I want to go in and do a search for a group. So I'm going to see this group. I'm going to go in and modify this group through Cayosoft Administrator from a membership perspective. So the person I want to add is Carig Birch. So I want to be able to go find Carig Birch. And here I can see that. The next thing you're going to notice is I must require some kind of service desk, some kind of documentation. So here, right, I have my ticket. I need to update default policy, right? I can spell. And now I want to update that. And you can see already that this is basically being time restricted. So now I want to update that. But you're going to see right now that I can't on my own. I have to actually get an approval to actually add myself to this group. So behind the scenes, my email is not working, but behind the scenes, basically what it would do is generate an email to the approver. And I'll show you that in the portal here in a minute. So if we look at the change approval required, right, I can see that. And then I'm going to click in here. And now you can see, right, this change requires approval. And I can go in and see my pending request. So now I know that this is a pending request. I can't do anything yet until the rock actually logs in and makes this approval for me. So let's go in and make this approval, and then I'll be able to then move forward with the access, and I'll show you that as well. So I'm going to log in as the rock, maybe. It helps when you type the right password. Now, the rock could have gotten an email, but we're going to just go to his pending task. So we can see that there is an approval request for the rock. And that approval request is, hey, Carig Birch, Tier 0 Carig Birch, requested access to be added to this Tier 0 GPO admins. So again, here, approved for DC update. So now I'm going to go in and approve the request. And now Carig Birch Tier 0 can actually go in and make group policy changes. So I want to go back to Cayosoft Guardian for a minute and see what this looks like in the console. So let's go back to Guardian and look at the change monitoring aspect of this. So if you look here, we see that the service account from administrator is authorized to make that change to the group. Whereas the other change that I tried to make natively through ADUC or even PowerShell, if it didn't come from the service account, it was going to get rolled back automatically. So now I can see clearly that, okay, Tier 0 admin properties, this guy was added, right? Was already approved, just in time access. And now he has access to perform, group policy management. So I'm going to close this console. And I'm going to relaunch the console to kind of show the next step. So I'm going to run as a different user in this scenario. And I'm going to log in again as this account. Now you can see I can create new group policies, and I have the ability to edit certain group policies. Now, what I won't be able to do is edit group policies that are outside of the Tier 0 scope, because this group policy is limited to things that are within the Tier 0 scope. So let's go in and modify a setting in the default domain controllers policy. So I'm just going to go in, update maybe a setting, just so you can see that visibility as well. Modify an existing group policy setting. Try to make this a little bit bigger. There we go. And what I want to look for is, I'm just going to change one of these settings here. And the first thing I'm going to do is just change it to success. So now I want to focus on only, not just Active Directory changes. I want to get very granular in my search. So I want to look for group policy only changes. So that's the other thing about Cayosoft Guardian. I can actually get very granular in what changed in the organization. So here I can see that Tier 0 Carig Birch was actually able to make the change and what was changed in the environment. Now, if this was something that was unintended, hey, maybe I made the wrong setting change and it broke something, I need to be able to quickly roll that setting back. And again, I have that rollback capability to then put it back in the environment. So is it doing the same thing that AGPM was providing? Not exactly, but it is providing us governance in regards to allowing just-in-time access and delegated access to group policy management. We have visibility into what changed in the environment. And then lastly, we also have that ability to roll back group policy changes inside of our organization, whether that be malicious, an admin making an oopsie in group policy. So again, not full version control, but actually more granular control on what was changed and rolling back an individual setting. And then the other thing that we also have in place is on the group itself, the only account that is allowed to make changes to that group is the Cayosoft Administrator Service account. So any changes, which I showed you earlier, that come to that group will automatically get seen and rolled back in an organization. So I want you to understand is this doesn't just apply to group policy changes all. These same exact principles can be applied to managing Microsoft Intune from a policy perspective. You can still apply just-in-time access concepts using either PIM, but you can also do it even if you don't have access to PIM through using Cayosoft Administrator, because that restricted group concept works the same way it does for Active Directory perspective. So you can do that same thing for just-in-time approval, and as well as Cayosoft Guardian monitors changes to Microsoft Intune policy and can roll that policy back as well. So again, we're not just looking at from, hey, we're just going to be able to audit and monitor and roll back group policy. We can take those same concepts and principles and apply it to modern day management using Microsoft Intune. So Brian, I want to come back to you and kind of get your insight. Are those the core capabilities that organizations should be looking for?
Yeah, I think this touches on everything that we covered around approvals, just in time, and change tracking and so forth.
Perfect. So was there Drew, were there any new questions that came in as part of the demonstration? I didn't see that aspect.
No, I didn't see any other questions come in. I guess there's a little time left if anybody wants to drop some in the chat.
Yeah, let's open it up for questions before we go to closing.
So if there's any questions out there, happy to help moderate that now. So please go ahead and just drop some in the chat. We'll give you guys a minute to type some out.
So I think we covered the majority of things. If there's no questions, Drew, I kind of went through the demonstration. So maybe some closing remarks here, Drew.
Yeah,
I think what to do next.
Yeah, I think, from the Cayosoft side, it would be great if we can just put in a quick shameless plug about the products that you were talking about, right? We have Administrator and we also have Cayosoft Guardian. These are great platforms to help with all the challenges and issues that Craig and Brian chat about. I'm going to go ahead and drop a couple of links into the chat for everybody to take a look at. And it looks like, as I'm doing that, a question did just come in. So I'll go ahead and drop those links into the chat. Todd did ask, can GPOs be exported and imported to other tenants?
I mean, you can still use native GPM or GPMC capabilities, so you could import, export into that tenant if you're taking it from dev to test. It's going to come down to what's been delegated inside of GPMC and really restricting the access within administrator, and then obviously Guardian will be the watcher or the enforcer of that change. We're going to see those changes as they're being imported as well, because they'll then be applied and linked to the new environment. As long as Guardian is monitoring those environments, we'll see those changes and can roll those back as well. But yes, native functionality can still work, if that was your direct question. So I guess, did we answer your question fully?
Thank you all. And Brian, I know you had a couple of things that you want to talk to about Ravenswood as well, right?
Yeah, I guess just introducing our team as well, since we work with Craig and Drew and the Cayosoft team, but here at Ravenswood, we're a professional services organization and work almost entirely in the Microsoft security, compliance, and identity stack. So about half of our business is focused around Active Directory. A lot of those very security and hardening driven these days. Things like group policy, tiering, privileged access workstations are things that we build day in and day out for enterprise and higher education customers. And then we also do quite a bit of work around Entra, Intune, Purview, and the Defender stacks as well.
Great. Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Craig. Really appreciate your time. I don't see any more questions coming into the chat, so I think we can go ahead and wrap this webinar up. We really appreciate, again, everybody taking the time to join us today and listening to the insights from Brian and Craig. Again, we will be sending the recording for this webinar out probably by the end of the week, so just be on the lookout. And again, we dropped some links into the chat. If you're interested in learning more about Ravenswood or any of the Cayosoft products, please follow those links and contact our teams. We're more than happy to support any way that we can. So everybody, I hope that you all have a great rest of your Tuesday. Go get some tacos and enjoy the day. Thank you all.
Looks like there was one more question that came in from Tim, but I didn't see it.
Tim, I think the chat is still oh, send the transcript, please. Yep, that's what I saw.
And then
no, I'm not seeing anything else in here. So I think we can go ahead and wrap up.
Well, I want to kind of go back to those questions real fast from a closing perspective, because now you're going to go back to your regular job. And I want you to go back and ask you those questions I mentioned earlier. So I want you to go back and say, okay, how am I managing group policy today? And am I just managing group policy, or am I also managing Microsoft Intune? Who has the ability to make changes in my environment? And how am I getting visibility into those changes today? And then lastly, am I able to roll those changes back, whether it come from the inside or the outside, from an attacker's perspective? And again, if you're not able to answer all of those questions, I would encourage you to reach out to Brian or Cayosoft and set up a further discussion on how we can help you secure your environments and improve your endpoint management capabilities. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate everybody again. Hopefully you all have a great rest of your day. Take care.
You as well.